This marks the final build update for my Poison Hexblast archetype and serves as a follow-up to my previous update, which was focused around mapping quality of life. In this update, I showcased the improved end game level boss damage, which can hit up to 11 million DPS with full poison uptime, although in practice, most things die before that can be achieved. I'll also go over some of the passage-through revisions and provide the PoB for this build, whilst going over how this archetype can be applied to other classes, as Acolyte of Chayula is definitely not the best choice at the moment. So the bossing setup hasn't actually changed too much. The main difference is, aside from the obvious gem levels, is the fact that we're using the Melting Maelstrom Mana Flask, which effectively allows us to do some ridiculous high damage combinations due to the fact that we don't actually have to use Inspiration at the moment. So I took Inspiration out. I've also taken out Comorbidity, wherever that's gone, and I've replaced this with cast speed, because the reason why I evaluate cast speed is because it much more normalizes your DPS. Think about it this way, right? I only have 50% crit chance. Even when I do get a crit, the value of the poison can roll anywhere between the normal base range of the damage. The poisons have a finite duration, so if I have a higher amount of cast speed, I'm increasing the chance that I'm dealing not only a critical hit, but a higher damage critical hit. So over the course of, let's say, 8 hits or something, more of them are more likely to be highly critical. I can get more hits in a normal 8-hit window, and just overall it will do quite a bit more damage. Something like this doesn't really show up on PoB very well, but it's quite a big damage increase when you think about it in actual practical terms. And we're also using same stuff as always, really, Deadly Poison, etc. Chaos Mastery I am using. I do have an alternative variation, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I do quite like this. It's just 11% more damage, 12% more damage, something like that. Now the main thing we like about this setup and this flask is it allows us to achieve a completely stacked Sigil of Power before any boss spawns in. You'll see from some of the Zest videos that I was able to do that very quickly. And the rotation for this, or rather the sort of preamble, the pre-rotation, the buff rotation, whatever you want to call it, it's actually quite simple, but it will take a little bit of practice to get this right. What you do is you cast Sigil of Power, and then you start, well, what I do is I start spamming curses to drain my mana pool. The reason being, I've linked my curses to my Temporal Chains, in this case, to Arcane Surge. So what happens here is I drop the Sigil of Power, which is backed by Persistence. Then I start casting this curse just to charge up the Persistence and get my Arcane Surge going a little bit. Use the Mana Flask, switch over to this. We've got a bit of lag, a bit of Arcane Tempo, and then bam, an Arcane Tempo, sorry, Mana Tempest, and then yeah, I can just do stuff like that. Now, you don't have to use Mana Tempest, as you saw it completely depletes my mana pool, but I'll just show you the tooltip a moment to show you a bit of the difference. So let's say 1 stack we have a DPS of 251k here, then we start spanning curses to bring it up to full level. Okay. Now we are at 386k and then it goes to 453k. And that is just on the tooltip DPS, by the way, guys. So if you can use Mana Tempest, I would strongly recommend it, but it is extremely dangerous, as you can see, especially for an MOM build. So I would only use this if you have the Melting Maelstrom Mana Flask. Now, if you look at what's back, PoB is back. Good old PoB, helping us calculate our builds to near perfection. Although, to be honest, PoB didn't really make very much of a difference for me. It sort of helped with this section, but I was testing this out before it came out anyway. It did help me with some of the configurations, like this poison duration thing, but I'll just talk about some of the things in more detail. You'll notice from my previous video the tree has changed a little bit. I am pathing a bit more towards this side. The reason being, I've been testing a 4 poison setup with stacking toxins. I'm in two minds about whether this is good or not. I think the issue is with Acolyte of Chayula, because I've only got 51% crit chance, and I think my poison duration is like 4 seconds or something like that. But the issue with this current setup and 4 poisons is I have a cast rate of 2, as you can see on screen. I hit 2 times per second, which means more or less every second I'm going to be doing 1 crit. Okay? So over the course of 4 seconds, I'll effectively do 4 crits, let's say, which can apply 4 poisons. The issue is it gets a bit close to the duration limit, which is it's anywhere between 3 and 4 seconds. It depends on whether or not I proc whatever it is, this thing over here. So it's a little bit inconsistent in my own testing. Now, if I had higher cast speed, like for example, if I had 2 very high cast speed breach rings and an ingenuity, then it might be quite good in that case. But in my own personal testing, I generally go for more of a 3 poison setup, but I left the tree as it is at the moment because it gives me a bit of flexibility if I want to test these things. If you have high cast speed, if you have high crit chance, I would try out a 4 poison setup. You do need quite a bit of duration because comorbidity does drop the duration of poisons, and I think this one does as well. Oh no, that's magnitude. It's this one that drops duration. You don't want your duration to go too low because it's it doesn't feel very good. You know, it's like you constantly have to apply poisons, and bosses move around a lot, especially when you don't have high DPS. They do move around a lot. It can be a bit kind of annoying. If you want to, I wouldn't recommend it. You can go here to these things here. What these do is these 3 nodes give you faster acting poisons, which effectively shorten your duration, but magnify the damage by, I think these 3 is like 27%, something like that. You can also get a bit extra hit damage here. The reason I don't is, well, for one, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 travel nodes. Yeah, I can't 1, 2, 3, 5 travel nodes. Sorry, I can't count today. I don't know. I think increasing the damaging rate of ailments is kind of like fake DPS because all it does is it shortens the duration and magnifies the actual damage. But I mean, it's only shortening it by 1 second. Yes, this looks good on PoB. You see, it gives me 2.5 million extra DPS, but I just don't think it's really that impactful. You can try it out if you like it, fair enough. I think you need quite a lot of duration and quite a lot of crit chance and cast speed to actually make value out of this. It will look good in the PoB. I don't think it's actually good in practice, to be honest, because especially if you're combining this with comorbidity, it's just not that good in my opinion. But you can make your own conclusions. Aside from that, not much has really changed. I took some points out here just for a bit of efficiency. Most of this is just duels and MOM. If anybody asks, by the way, this looks a bit kind of ugly because I'm not taking any clusters apart from, I guess, MOM. The way I kind of see it is, well, I'm getting a lot of duels, which are actually a very large amount of damage. Look, this one here, 1 million DPS, 1.18 million DPS, 700k. This one's kind of crappy. This is 250k. I should get rid of that. This one here. Yeah, all these duels are like 1 million DPS, guys. So it looks like my original sort of calculations were correct in that they're about 10% linear damage scaling for every duel you get, something like that. So the way I look at it is I'm investing, what's this, 18 points into getting 1, 2, 3, 4 dual sockets and MOM. That's not bad. That's pretty good. I mean, if I didn't put points in here, I'd have to find some dual points anyway, and I'd probably have to put them in like energy shield over here, etc. So if you're using a pure MOM build like I am, which might not be as good as energy shield, to be honest, but if you are using that, it's a pretty good setup, even if it does look kind of inefficient because you got all these travel nodes, but most of these are duals, so that is something to remember. I don't put points into into dark entries at the moment. You can, if you want to, maybe you could take something out the crit or something on the poisons, maybe this here if you don't need the evasion rating. I mean, it is more damage. It's 5 points for 1.5 million. It's not too bad. It's fine. I have enough damage. I don't think I need any more, but you can go here if you want to. It's entirely up to you. This node here is very, very good, but it's kind of awkward to path 1, 2, 3, 4 points to get an extra 1.4 million DPS. Whereas I could just put the points like here or something, you know. It's not that much of a difference, but you can go this if you want. What this basically does, if you have the Melting Maelstrom Mana Flask, which lasts like 9 seconds, it effectively means you just get an extra 50 crit damage bonus basically for free. So it is quite nice. And that covers the majority of the passive tree changes. You can actually, if you want to, go a slightly alternative setup where you give up this and you give up this here. You give up the extra poisons. And then maybe you can put some points. You can get this dual socket here. You can maybe get this if you want to. And then you can get the evasion from this section here. It gives you about an extra 2 points to play around with because you can put some here as well if you want. And then on the skill tree, you can make a few changes with, you can go comorbidity to make up for the fact that you need the extra poison, take out Chaos Mastery or whatever. As you can see, this build is higher damage, 12.78 million. on PoB. In practice, you probably won't get this amount because it requires you to have like poisons ticking over a long period of time, right? That's kind of how this is calculated. You get the same evasion rating. So you can go for this setup if you want to, missing out on cast speed, and then maybe you can put the cast speed like here or something. I don't know, whatever your level is, that's entirely up to you. But I prefer the original setup, to be honest. Mainly because, again, comorbidity drops your poison duration, so even though this is theoretically like 1.5 million more DPS, I think just the quality of life is just less. Long poison duration is quite good because it means you constantly have time to keep overwriting poisons with more powerful versions, right? So it's just very, very good for overall kind of damage consistency. But, you know, in Path of Exile 2, once you get above like 6 million, most things die pretty quickly anyway. So you don't really get to see the full benefit unless you're testing out like a 6-party setup or something. Then in that case, you know, do whatever you want. You can find the most efficient path for yourself. In terms of items, nothing really has changed from my last update. A few little things here and there. Oh, and I did get a Prism of Belief, obviously. That's, I should have mentioned that. Get a Prism of Belief, guys. There are about 15 divines at the moment. I still don't have an Ingenuity. The rest here is just minor upgrades, maybe of the last thing. Moira Invictus. Yep, but don't think there's much to talk about here. I'll just provide the PoB and you can check it out yourself. There's not too much to talk about in that regard. Skills, again, mostly the same. I talked about this earlier. You can play around with these if you want. Oh, by the way, for mapping, obviously you don't need to have this set up. This is entirely for bossing. For mapping, you can put on Inspiration, obviously take off Comorbidity, take off Concentrate Effect. You don't need that. You can keep on Consider Casting if you want. It gives you a nice bit of chunky damage. You can take off Deadly Poison, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would put on Lightning Penetration, personally. Lightning Penetration and Arcane Surge. While mapping, specifically. Oh, also one important thing while mapping. The same rules that I mentioned earlier apply. If you are mapping, you can spec into these nodes here. Put these 4 and take off the Withered. You don't need the Withered while you're mapping. This is only a Pinnacle boss thing. For Pinnacle bosses only, you can unlabel this thing, Wither. If not, just put it in the AoE. AoE with Hexblast feels a lot more comfortable when mapping. And I should also add that when you are bossing, you will not actually use a Prism of Belief. You'll instead swap it for the Mana Gain on Kill Duel. That's quite important, so please remember that. You do not need +3 levels when you're mapping. It's just not necessary. And finally, with this PoB, I'll just explain a bit on the configuration. Now, thankfully, there was an update to PoB a few days ago, so the update to PoB effectively meant that we didn't have to do these custom modifiers for things like Archmage, and Deadly Poison wasn't working properly. Things like that. 1 minute, I've screwed up this tree. What have I done? I'll fix that. 1 moment, everybody. Okay, we're back to the old setup. Yeah, so as I was saying about the configuration, there's a few things that we just have to factor in here. Sigil of Power doesn't work in PoB for some reason. So I just had to add a custom modifier for that. Like, look, if I increase my stages, I get no extra damage, so that was all custom. Oh, by the way, I'm not currently running any Chayula Breach Flames because I don't have the time to pick them up. Buff Chayula, please. 3 poisons, the enemy is poisoned. Yep, I'm assuming I have Arcane Surge because I can proc it for bosses as I showed in the demonstration. We apply 10 poisons quite easily for the enhanced duration. The main reason being your Eye of Winter just applies like 10 pretty much immediately. But anyway, for the configuration, we can have full uptime on Sigil of Power for bosses, as I demonstrated, so you can give yourself 56% more spell damage here. Despair doesn't seem to work with Blasphemy very well in PoB, so I added a custom modifier. Be careful, by the way. Your DPS will look a lot higher if you enable Blasphemy here in the skills section. So I have Blasphemy linked to Despair, but I actually just took it off because it massively overestimated my damage. It was like, it wasn't taking into account the fact that Blasphemy reduces the effect of curses, so I was getting some crazy number. So I just manually reduced the amount of chaos resistance that the enemy has. Oh, by the way, apparently in PoE 2, bosses have 0 chaos res. How about that, huh? I didn't think of this. I assumed it would be 30 like it would be in PoE 1, but fair enough. Maybe this is true. And I've also added a modifier here for Mana Tempest. The main reason being, it's another thing that just doesn't work at the moment. So you can take this off if you want. You know, it's a bit risky. If you take it off, your DPS goes down by a little bit, but not a huge amount, and you don't have to worry about mana or anything like that. I want to show you guys something cool. If I was a blood mage, right? Let's assume I'm playing a blood mage right now, and I have an extra 300% increased critical damage bonus. Yeah, DPS goes to like 17.5 million. And you could probably get a lot more than that. You don't need to play a Chayula. You just don't, okay? I stuck with this because I thought Into the Breach would be very good for mapping, and it was until tier 10 and tier 11. And then PoE 2 becomes PoE 1. That's just how it is, but you know, we still like it. So I would recommend a blood mage if you can get one working. There's a guy called Trayton, I think his name is. I'll put his name in the description. He does a very good blood mage build. Things to consider, final things on this configuration are the ailment calculation mode I have is crits only. Beware here, there's this is me doing a custom modifier to actually get PoB to recognize the poison correctly. So in the normal configuration, I think it just assumes like an average poison rate based off, I guess, your critical hit chance, but because our poison duration is high, our crit chance is reasonable, and our cast speed is 2 per second, we can assume we're always applying a critical poison, and we only have to go for 3. This becomes a bit more tenuous once you have 4, but at 3 it's fine. So we can keep this enabled, crits only for poison, since, you know, this is a crit build. Perfectly fine in my opinion. And, well, do you remember in my very first video where I said that poisons make up like 85% of my damage? Yeah, it turns out it's more than that. It's like 89%, something like that. Look at that, right? Puny Hexblast without poisons, even with crit and Archmage, 1 million DPS. With poisons, 11 million DPS, right? Poisons are crazy, guys. You have to use poisons if you can. Ask yourself if you can use a poison, you should, on pretty much any high base damage build. As for this DPS, yeah, it seems a little bit too high. It's probably slightly less than that. I mean, if I was just attacking one enemy, like a target dummy for 1 whole minute, then yeah, it's probably going to be this number, but as you saw, most things die pretty quickly anyway by the time the poisons even ramp up. But, you know, that's just how poison builds work. Okay, and that is pretty much that. I don't think I'll come back to this character. I don't really have anything else I need to do on this character at the moment, to be honest, apart from maybe answer some questions. I've already documented like the whole sort of process of strengthening this character, made it rid of improvements over time. I don't even have an ingenuity. I should get one, but that's fine. It's another 20 divines. I'm okay. I've already spent enough. My total investment in this character so far has been about 60 divines or something like that. Mostly from this flask plus the Prism of Belief, which on its own is like 36 or something. But yeah, it was a pretty fun build. Pretty high damage, pretty good mapping. Generally good at all things in the game, but not the absolute top in any one category. Especially those lightning builds. They are crazy. Okay guys, well, it's been fun. And I'll see you on my next build, which may be a HCSSF Poison Chronomancer. I'm not entirely sure yet, but we'll see. Okay, take care.